Hello everyone, thank you for listening. It's great to be presenting here at the North American Bitcoin Conference, BTC Miami. Wish I were there in person. For those of you in Miami, hats off, place to be. Look forward to this discussion and hopefully be there in person before too long. Talking about the institutions here coming into our distributed ledger space, and so I referenced Paul Revere, who famously wrote and said the British were coming, and I kind of feel everyone in the space is talking about the institutions are coming along the same way. You know, I helped found Fluence Labs. Was early at Hedera Hashgraph and have been involved kind of around institutions for a long time, and I'm excited for them to enter the space. But I think we got to kind of unpack a little bit about what they're actually going to be doing here. So first, you know, what are institutions buying? I think they're going to be buying Bitcoin. What are they going to use? They're going to use Hedera Hashgraph. I think is the best solution for institutions. And how do you then compete with institutions? Well, Fluence Labs, I think, is probably the best alternative in a way to compete with them in a real scalable, powerful fashion. What are institutions doing? We hear that term a lot, but we got to parse out a little bit more detail as to what institutions actually mean. So first, on my right, maybe your left, banks. And banks are kind of a really important piece of the institutional ecosystem because they were famously allergic and hostile to Bitcoin originally, and Jamie Dimon being kind of the real most visible example of that. And they also have huge client bases and carry a lot of influence. And so when we see banks come out with large price targets far in excess of where Bitcoin is today, that's a very powerful signal across the whole world. It's also good to see corporates put Bitcoin on their balance sheet, as we've seen with a couple companies, MassMutual, MicroStrategy, and Square. That's also very powerful. And then you see businesses being built by brand name companies like Fidelity, Nomura, Goldman Sachs. You see PayPal providing, you know, as everyone here knows, significant on-ramps to Bitcoin, which is also very exciting. And then, kind of on my left, family offices and investors investing in Bitcoin. That clearly is what we need to see for the space to mature, and it's exciting to see some of these really well-known names investing in it. And why are they doing it? Well, they're doing it because they see Bitcoin, I think, as a store of value, a digital store of value. And like gold, it's scarce and durable. It's also divisible, which gold is not very well divisible. You can't shave off 1/100th of a bar of gold and use it in any way. It's much more transportable, much easier to store. It's much more censorship resistant. You know, while gold you can keep under your mattress or in your home, if it's in a vault, as a lot of gold is, it's very easy to seize. And in fact, it was back in the United States, you know, years ago. And also gold much more easily to be counterfeited. Billions of dollars of gold has been counterfeited, most recently just in China. The only thing that Bitcoin doesn't have that gold does is a 1,000-year-long track record. But I think these other attributes of Bitcoin are very powerful and help make up for that. And so let's look at the supply metrics of gold versus Bitcoin. And a couple of very interesting similarities here. About the same as off the market. Central banks hold about 16% of gold. Don't think that's going to get sold anytime soon. About 19% of Bitcoin is presumed lost. That's not coming on the market either. And mined annually, about 1.5% right now for each. Bitcoin that's going to go down going forward, as everybody knows. And remaining to mine is about 10-11% for Bitcoin, about 26% for gold. And the gold costs a lot to mine, so that number may be overstated as well. The one thing I want to focus on here is jewelry. And jewelry is about half of gold use. And I don't think, you know, people debate whether people wear gold jewelry because it's pretty or because it's a store of value. And, you know, I think it probably has a bit to do with both, but the store of value is important. What I'm more focused on is the billions of people that own gold as jewelry. Billions. And I think it's going to be some time before Bitcoin distribution is anywhere near or is clear on that path to having billions of people adopt it and use it and hold it. And so I think until we see that, a conservative price target for Bitcoin takes out that gold. It's about $250,000 per Bitcoin. But as soon as we start to see central bank digital currencies really get used, I think consumers globally are going to become very comfortable with digital currencies, and Bitcoin will quickly be on a path to multi-billion user adoption, which then will take it up to parity with gold. So this is more of an interim price target, I guess, than an ultimate long-term one. And who holds gold? Well, importantly, a lot of gold is held by institutions that buy the ETF, because it's an easy way to do it. And the gold ETF GLD is actually one of the largest holders of gold. So I think that once we see an ETF happen in the States, that will be a real easy way for institutions to buy it. And when we think about institutions, you know, I showed those lists earlier, but that's just tiny. There's about 10 banks in it. or have made kind of public comments out of hundreds. Investors, I mentioned about 10. There are thousands of investors out there. Corporates, 3 have it on the balance sheet. I have 1,000 plus corporates just in the States. And then family offices, maybe there's 100 who've invested that we kind of know about or can guess to. There are 3,000 billionaires alone in the world, 3,000. And there are 4 or 5, 10,000 very wealthy families. So the amount of adoption here and of buying of Bitcoin has been very, very small when you put it in this grand scheme of things. So the wave that we've seen so far and the price appreciation, the discussion of people buying it, that wave is nothing compared to what is coming. And so what are the risks in 2021 and the catalyst for Bitcoin? Clearly, the Coinbase IPO is going to be very positive for it. And a Bitcoin ETF and additional regulatory clarity, hopefully coming with the new SEC commissioner, will also be very positive. There are a variety of risks as well, though. 200,000 Bitcoin being released by the Mt. Gox trustee will be, uncertain as to how that will impact the market. And I want to focus on the Bitfinex Tether potential legal action by the New York State AG. And that, to the extent that is a big deal, it could cause a correction in Bitcoin. But I think that is going to be largely misunderstood and will probably be a very interesting buying opportunity. So if institutions started with Bitcoin, as many of us did, what are they actually, and we've seen the impact it had, what are they actually going to be using? Because whatever they're going to be using is also going to have a terrifically powerful element to be invested in. And so I think, what do institutions care about? And we've got to focus on that to see what they're actually going to be using. They care about speed, security, privacy, price certainty, and governance. And I'm going to focus mainly on price certainty and governance because those are 2 areas I think the distributed ledger space hasn't focused on well because there haven't been a terrific number of institutions here so far. And I think we're going to discover that's really important. First, in terms of, all these companies trying to get institutional level adoption, most of them are chasing use cases that they can't execute if they catch them. They don't have the capacity for higher volume. Those that do have somewhat higher volume capacity they're mainly leader-based, and they don't have the security levels able to reliably manage the type of data and be resilient to the type of attacks that institutions and corporates are going to want to insist they be resilient to. None of them have finality, which is important for a variety of financial circumstances, financial cases, and very few to none have pricing that's fixed in fiat. And why is fixed in fiat important? Well, if you're a corporation, you want to budget out over the next year. You can't have your pricing going up by 3 times, 5 times, 10 times. It's just not possible. And if you look at Ethereum this year, just in the last 6 months, it's gone from gas prices from 8 cents to 80 cents to $15. The easiest way to put your job in jeopardy to corporation is to take crypto risk. Nobody wants to do that. And so Hedera offers pricing fixed in fiat at 1/100 of a penny. That is incredibly reassuring to institutions and to the people who actually are going to be deploying this and have to create budgets for it. Governance is also incredibly important. Who is the network managed for? It's a regulatory risk. Well, Hedera is governed by enterprises for enterprises. They own, oversee, and control it. And why is that important? Well, if you're using a network, don't you want it to be governed by the people that you like, trust, and have similar interests as you? And we all do. And so if you're a corporation, I think you're taking a great deal of comfort that Google, IBM, Nomura, LG, Deutsche Telekom, Boeing, they're the ones making the decisions. That gives you a great deal of comfort that if they're doing it and overseeing it, you are in good hands. And that's called alignment, where the governance of the companies using it are the same of the people they're deploying it. And it's not coin holders, it's not developers, it's not a few miners. That does not make companies, institutions, boards comfortable at all. And so this governance is going to be critical in differentiating the real institutional companies that are adopted by institutions versus those that are not. And that's I think, why Hedera is the choice for institutions, because it has the speed, security, governance. It also has privacy. And that is a way of having all your data in a private network, but you put the transactions in order on the ledger. So you basically have public level security with private network data. That's very powerful. Institutions love it. And I think that is going to be a real way that the DLT is deployed around institutions initially. And you don't have to take my word for it. Hedera right now is doing 1.5 million daily transactions. That's the second most of any network out there. the Coupon Bureau is one example. It's putting 300 billion coupons on Hedera. That's over 6,000 TPS for one use case. That's not even contemplatable with other base layers. Other competitors couldn't even address that opportunity. So how do we compete with institutions? If institutions are buying Bitcoin and they're using Hedera, we have to take a step back and realize, hold on a second, the whole point of this space was to compete with institutions and to challenge these large monopolies. You know, in the 1700s, Paul Revere made his famous ride to warn that the British were coming. You know, there was no rider to warn us about the dominant tech monopolies that were coming to take over the internet and have effectively dominating it now and are basically, you know, incredible bullies around the internet the way the British were, hundreds of years ago. And you've got Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Apple just dominating and actually putting lots of companies out of business. Their graveyard is littered with companies who have been unable to compete, and there's far more who never even tried to compete because they knew the odds were stacked against them. So how do you end up competing, and what's more powerful than these large internet giants? Well, the global developer community. Far, far stronger. Doesn't have to be organized, doesn't have to look pretty, doesn't have to be polished, but it's far larger and far more powerful. What do you have to do? You have to just give them the tools. They just need a couple tools and they can compete with these monopolies. And you need three things. You need a distributed compute protocol so you can have trustless hosting and computation that can't be cut off by any central party. You need a simple programming language to create scripts that allow you to build applications very easily and simply. And you need a blockchain-based economic layer that allows compensation and reward to flow up and down the system. You need to have all three. If you just have one, it doesn't work. There's plenty of distributed compute protocols out there, but by itself it doesn't serve nearly the purpose. You need the language and you need this economic reward layer, not just donations. You need that all to work. And the compute protocol has to be general purpose. You can't just be deterministic based on blockchain. It has to be much broader so that any type of code can run on it. And just use the blockchain for the license enforcement. And so Fluence has separated the authorship from runtime, where you create the code, you create the applications, you publish them, and then they're out there. And you have the runtime, where once the applications are in Fluence, authors and developers can build on top of them, know they cannot be cut off. And importantly here, developers can build with confidence. But the difference here versus others is that the hosting revenue is shared with the author. And that gives people incentive to put applications, put code, develop on top of it because of that reward element. And that creates a very powerful, interesting ecosystem. So let's show how it works. A white label chat app with a couple users, and then some other developers come along, add a couple features, add more users, and those users flow down to the white label chat app. More users come, build on top of it yet again, and you end up having more different applications built. Each time one of these applications is built, they're just building that, adding that little piece on top of it. They're not rebuilding everything below it. And that allows incredibly cheap, fast innovation. Each one of these groups gets their own users and their own ecosystem based on their own UI and their own features. But they're sharing all the work that happened below them. That is incredibly fast, easy, powerful innovation that hasn't before really been possible. And so Fluence allows us fast innovation and allows to be scalable. You only pay for what you use. You don't have to rebuild infrastructure every time you get a next kind of step function up in users. You just scale up as the hosting providers scale up. And it's secure. No central party can cut off access or disable hosting. And so Fluence is going to really revolutionize the way applications were built because it's so easy. And it reminds us of the cathedral model for software development, where software used to be built in proprietary closed ecosystems, but that did not scale well. Eric Raymond recognized this in his famous book. And if you look at the bazaar, that's been proven in software development to be incredibly powerful, where decentralized, autonomous developers collaborate and create incredibly robust, quickly done, powerful applications. What we're basically doing is bringing this bazaar model of OSS software development to applications and allowing that same level of creativity, innovation, collaboration to happen with software. And so where does Fluence stand? Founded in 2017, a lot of papers published. We launched our compute network on November 12th, and we're going to launch our blockchain in 2021. Our goal is to empower the next wave of internet innovation. So come find us on fluence.network. And, to sum this up, we think institutions are going to continue to buy Bitcoin. Institutions are going to use Hedera. It's going to become the default choice for high transaction mission critical applications. And Fluence is going to be the only way, certainly the best way to compete with the institutional tech monopolies, and will drive an innovation wave. So follow us at Hedera, Fluence Project, or find me at the Tom Trow or tomtrow.com. Thanks very much. Really appreciate your time.